presenting employee ownership, protect your legacy even in challenging times, with support and funding from the project from the San Francisco Office of Economic Development. We'd like to also give a shout out to Manish and the whole team there who do great work in San Francisco, as well as excellent support for the community. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Today we'll be speaking about who we are, Project Equity, and the work we do with employee ownership. We'll talk about the benefits of employee ownership, as well as the challenges and opportunities during these times that we are in. We'll cover the basic models of employee ownership and talk about the transition process and how these actually work. And then we'll wrap up and be able to answer any burning questions you have about employee ownership, Project Equity, and the work we do, and give you an opportunity to have your voice heard as well. All right, so let's introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Miyaka Cochrane. I'm a business engagement and partnership manager based here in the Bay Area. I'm over in the East Bay in Richmond, and I work with and support Donna in the city of San Francisco in our work there. I'm a California native and love the Bay Area dearly. Donna, why don't you go ahead and take the mic?
Yes, yeah, and I'm Donna Sky. I'm also business development manager here at Project Equity and a longtime business owner myself in the city of San Francisco. I owned a food manufacturing business for about 10 years. So working with and supporting business owners is something that's always been near and dear to my heart. Back to you, Miyaka.
Excellent, thank you so much. Okay, so Project Equity. Our mission is to foster economic resiliency in communities by demonstrating and replicating strategies that increase worker ownership. There are many ways that worker ownership can really benefit not only the business and the employees, but the communities themselves. So let's take a look at that. First of all, what is employee ownership? Now, a lot of ownership in company is thought of as either private ownership by an individual or potentially stock options as a way to, as a form of employee ownership, usually available to managers or people who have been at the company for a long time. Sometimes in a startup environment, they're given as incentive in addition to wages. And but in contrast, broad-based employee ownership gives all employees that meet a basic criteria the opportunity to become employee owners. So let's say that could be that you are a full-time employee that has worked at the company for at least 1 year, 2 years, whatever the criteria is set as. You have an opportunity to become an employee owner. Now, employee ownership has a lot of amazing benefits and really is one of the best kept secrets in business acquisitions today. Let's cover a little bit about why. First of all, employee ownership has a great impact on the business and the community. So the benefits for the business specifically is on average, you're seeing profit margins that are 8.5% higher than peers. This makes employee-owned businesses have a competitive advantage in their industry and in the market. In addition to that, on average, you see more sales growth and employment that comes with sales growth. So the business does better and is able to hire more employees and employ more people in the area. And in addition to hiring more, there's actually fewer layoffs with employee ownership as well. They're on average more economically sound and have a hardiness towards the future in terms of having a bigger profit margin. And this also translates into having fewer layoffs. In terms of the unique benefits of employee buyouts here, we see it as a win-win-win. So first of all, the owners themselves can achieve a fair sales price. They don't have to necessarily give up on getting a sales price that is going to be equitable for them. And owners retain an influence on the pacing and timeline of the exit. They can exit as a part of this process. They can stick around for years to come in their current role or in a different leadership role if they would like. And in addition to that, it also preserves the company's legacy, culture, people, and other assets. So it's a great way to ensure that this independent business remains independent and rooted in the community. When we compare it against other options, we have different ways that you can sell a business. One of the sort of classic ways that businesses are passed on is through generations, selling to family members. This is a great way to preserve the legacy. Depending on the situation, you may not necessarily get market value, depending on if your children or other family members have the equity to be able to purchase at a good sales price. And there aren't necessarily tax benefits as well. The retaining employees, depending on how the business goes and the plans of those family members, is uncertain as well. In private acquisition, nothing is necessarily clear, right? What the company that's going to purchase your business is going to do, the future owner, are they going to maintain it in the community and preserve it? Are they going to strip it for parts, take the assets and close the business, or roll it up into their brand and remove that local identity? What the value of that and what you're going to be able to get from that sale is unknown, and there's not any tax benefits with that. Now, employee ownership really is a way to be able to tick all these boxes. It's going to preserve the legacy and keep the business alive and thriving. It has an opportunity to be able to get a good market value for the business as the owner. There are tax benefits that you can take advantage, and it's a fantastic way to not only retain employees but grow the business. And of course, what we don't want to see, and which is becoming unfortunately too common in these times, is the closing down of operations. We want to do everything we can to prevent that option because it helps no one. Now, why the time is now for employee ownership? So I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and hand it off to my colleague, Donna.
Thank you, Miyaka. So yes, with all that is going on for business owners now, for business owners, workers, and in our communities, I'd like to just talk a little bit about why employee ownership is such a relevant and timely matter. Miyaka, can you, next slide? It has become even more clear during the crisis that workers, especially our frontline and essential workers, are not economically secure. Almost half of all US families can't manage a $400 emergency expense. And 6 out of 10 of the fastest growing occupations pay under $30,000 a year. So, over half of the fastest growing jobs pay less than $30,000 a year. As well, economists predict an increased period of long-term unemployment in the US resulting from the economic impact of the pandemic. Next slide. So nationally, there's also a silver tsunami happening, meaning that nearly half of all privately held job-creating businesses are owned by people of retirement age. So as these baby boomers retire, this will impact a huge number of businesses and jobs. Statistically, they're showing around 2.3 million businesses, which would impact around 25 million jobs. So, we're talking big numbers here. But the risk of the silver tsunami also creates an opportunity for us to think about business retention and ownership differently. Next slide. And more locally, San Francisco business success is really vital to our region's economy. Here locally and of course through the Northern California region. But in San Francisco, there are over 8,000 businesses that are over 20 years old, and they employ about a quarter of all workers here. They also account for over half of the small business revenue in the city. So, really having a big economic impact of our economy. And, as these baby boomers retire as part of the silver tsunami, employee ownership can help keep these businesses in San Francisco. and expand opportunities to create wealth and equity for their employees. Next slide. And employee ownership via an employee buyout can also be the right exit or selling option for a business owner that's considering retirement, or even just restructuring their business. Even though there are many stories about these big unicorn companies that sell for millions or even billions of dollars here in the Bay Area, it turns out that for most businesses, selling a business isn't easy. Only about 20% actually sell. So that's 1 in 5 businesses that are listed will actually sell. And only about 15% of those businesses would transition via a family transition. And that's a percentage that is much lower than it was in the past. So as a result, unfortunately, a large number of these businesses would risk closing down. But employee ownership can provide kind of an exit or a sale that's right under a owner's nose via an employee buyout. And it can provide a fair market price for the owner, but also keep the company assets and jobs here locally. Next slide. So now I'd like to hand it back to Miyaka for a fun and interactive poll he has planned for you all today. Miyaka?
Thank you very much, Donna. Yeah, so we're gonna shake things up a little bit and have a bit of a quiz that we like to call the Project Equity Challenge. So follow along, tally yourself and see how you do. So first of all, question 1, we have true or false. Selling to employees requires accepting a lower selling price. Is it true or is it false? The answer is false. Fair sales price is established by a debt capacity analysis to ensure that the business owner is getting an equitable price for the amount of work that they put in to build that business. Question 2, true or false? Employees are going to have to foot the bill, as it were. Do the employees have to have the money to purchase the business? True or false? That is false. Employees are not obligated to finance the transaction. Usually it is completed through a leveraged buyout, which we'll talk about later. This presents a great option for a business owner and employees as a way to transition the business without having the employees have to pay for the whole thing up front. Now, question 3, true or false? Owners can remain involved in strategic direction after they sell. Can they sell the business and still remain strategically influential? The answer is true. Selling owners have many options to stay involved in the business, either in their current role, transitioned as an employee owner. There's also going to be a board of directors established, and they could join the board to take a little bit of a back seat, but still remain strategically involved in the governance. And final question, question number 4. True or false? All employees will be managing the business equally. This is one of the most common questions that we get. Is it true or is it false? That is false. Management would be in place to ensure robust operational structure. This is important because if your business has been successful, we want to keep the operational structure in place to maintain that success and grow it. All right, thank you very much for playing. I hope you did well and maybe learned something along the way. Now, there are multiple forms of employee ownership, and I'd like to cover 2 of the most common models. The first being worker-owned cooperatives. So what is a worker-owned cooperative? It's 100% employee-owned, and it's one of the most popular options because of the price. It's lower cost to set up, and there's a full range of democratic values and possibilities that you can implement with this. So it's democratically governed, not democratically managed, which we learned in the quiz. It's equitable for the employees. They're able to participate in profit sharing. It's less expensive. It's tax positive, meaning that there are actually some tax benefits that you can take advantage as a cooperative, which help profitability. And there's an equity state for the employees. It's also universal. This worker-owned cooperative model can be applied to every industry. You commonly see them with grocery stores, pizzerias, and things like that, but really there are examples across the country and in Europe where cooperatives really originated that show and demonstrate how successful they can be across all industries and different business types. The other popular one is an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP. This one is actually unique to the United States and works functionally as a qualified retirement plan, just like a 401k. So profits of the business are used to basically transfer all or part of the company shares to a trust administered on behalf of the employees that they get to get good retirement for. Now, these are size dependent, so really they're very expensive to set up, the upfront cost, and there's ongoing administrative fees as well because of the fact that it's a retirement plan that's governed by the same body that governs the 401k. And so, these can be extremely beneficial for large companies of, 30 plus employees and a high revenue stream annually. Now, we've learned about the models, we've learned about the benefits, but how does a transition actually take place? What is the process? So let's first cover what is a transition. A transition to employee ownership is the sale of a business to a new entity with employees as owners. The purchase can be financed by a loan taken out by this new entity, the new company, and repaid over time through future profits. Most transition businesses retain executives and management that were currently in place, with employee owners now electing, voting, and sometimes serving as well on a board of directors. This is really common in terms of how the process works. And if we dig into it, let's look at this graph or this image here. So first of all, we have to establish a sales price and deal terms, finalize those. Then the new employee-owned business entity obtains a loan, and that loan is paid off through future revenue. So really, it's a new entity that is taking out debt to purchase the old entity so that the owner is able to get paid in the process. How it's financed, where that debt is lended, generally is from a community development financial institution, a community development fund, or potentially a bank, local banks. There are various funding sources, including a fund that we've developed with a partner as well called Shared Capital. So there's lots of different ways to do this. But typically what we see is business owners participating in that financing through taking a seller's note. So the owner says, all right, well, I will take 30 to 50% of the total sales price as a sales note. So I agree to get paid over time for that portion. So if they do 50-50, the bank cuts them a check for that 50% at the time of the sale, and then the owner typically gets paid back the other 50%, around 5 to 7 years, depending on the deal. And then the employee owners in a cooperative model have a nominal buy-in. So this can be anywhere from a couple $100 up to a few thousand, depending on what's decided as a part of the process. And that can be taken out of future paychecks over time as well. So they don't necessarily have to pay that out of pocket immediately either. Now, how we do this in our transition program is we start with an exploration. We're here to create more successful employee-owned businesses, and we want to make sure that you as the owner really have all the information and tools you need to make that decision and see if it's a right fit for you. So if you're curious and you want to explore this, either casually, we can have a conversation with you and just talk a little bit more in depth about this, or if you're certain that this is something you want to seriously consider, we can actually do some things to help measure that viability for you. The second step is moving into a feasibility assessment program. And this is a 3 to 4 month process that's really a deep dive into what your business would look like as an employee-owned entity. So we go everything from financials, we establish that debt capacity through an analysis, we talk about management transition with you and make a plan for that, whether you're exiting or staying, and then we do some initial employee engagement with a small handful of employees that you would identify as being the ones that you really want to bring in a little bit more closely into the conversations and the considerations for this transition. Once you have this and like a straw model or somewhat of a blueprint of your business and what the transaction would look like for you financially, you know, all the mechanics of it, then you could decide at that point to do a transition. So we could enter in a transition phase and we'd actually execute everything that we set up in that feasibility assessment. So we want to make sure that we go over how will the employee-owned business function? What are the bylaws? How do we establish the board, et cetera, et cetera. We work through that with you, work with you and the employees to agree on that sales price and develop the funding as a part of the process. Once we close the sale, we just check all the I's and cross all the T's, make sure everything's set. As the owner, you get paid based on the financing scenario. And then we actually offer a unique program called our Thrive program. So after this transaction, we're going to stay with that business for another up to 2 years for continued additional support or guidance as needed. So to make sure that that business is continuing to thrive. Now, we've covered a little bit of how the transition works. I want to speak a little bit about why this might be a good option for you specifically. So what are your needs and why might this be a good fit? So if you find yourself saying any of these statements or anything similar, this definitely could be something worth exploring. Maybe you want to preserve what you've built and see it thrive. Well, selling business to the employees is a great way to preserve that culture and operational strength that made it so strong in the first place. Perhaps you want to take care of your employees when you leave and make sure that they continue to have a place to work and grow. Employees are able to share in the success of the business through patronage, it's profit distribution, so that they're able to not only be able to ensure to keep their jobs, but participate in profit and have additional financial opportunities to incentivize them to stay as well. Maybe you've already gone down the path of trying to find a buyer and it's you've struggled to find one, or you're doubtful based on the necessity of your business. Well, the employees have that qualifying experience and can purchase via a leveraged buyout. And even if you don't have a direct person that could replace you in a key operational role, we can assist you and support you in finding someone else to bring in to be able to take that. So if you need another general manager or CEO that just doesn't have the skill set that none of the employees have the skill set for, you can absolutely bring someone in as a part of this process, which is going to be more straightforward than necessarily finding a private buyer. Or maybe you'd like to remain involved, but you're ready for someone else to take the reins, or maybe you want to share the burden of ownership a little bit more and have a little bit more time to yourself. This can be a way for you to remain involved, continue to influence and steer the business in an operationally leadership role, or just take the weight off and be able to have more partners take on sort of the heavier lifting that ownership entails. And last but not least, maybe you want your employees to just engage more in the business. Maybe you don't want to leave at all, but you're just want to find a way to engage and activate your employees more in the success of the business. Well, this is one of the things that fosters ownership culture. Employee ownership, increases productivity and engagement in the business because the employees have a tangible understanding that by putting in more and thinking about the business as a whole, that they're going to reap some of the benefits of that, and it's a natural motivator. So thank you very much. Before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to mention that we do offer free business advisory calls, thanks in part to funding from our partner. So how to sign up for that is you can actually just go to project-equity.org/CA and be able to sign up for a free consultation. And Donna or myself or one of our other business engagers will be happy to talk to you, whether you just want some more general information or ask some questions about how this stuff works a little bit more, or if you're ready to seriously consider it, we can help you in any case. So we'd love to speak with you. Please go ahead and reach out. We have slots still available through the end of the year, so we'd love for you to take advantage of that and have a chat with you about your business. So now let's move into the questions and discussion. So I'd love to open it up. I'll turn on my video so you can see me again. Hello, hello. And what we'd like to do is just take some questions from the audience. So if you haven't already, there is a section where you can actually ask a question, and then we'll be able to take a look at those and answer some of them on the fly.
Yes, and I'd like to also reiterate what Miyaka said. You know, these one-to-one calls, yes, if you are ready to do a deep dive into employee ownership, we're available to do that. But as Miyaka said, if you have more general questions by nature or want to explore more broadly your succession options, we're available to support you with that. And you know, we're here to help as you consider your future business plans.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Donna. So I see a couple questions already popping up. So we'll start with, there's one that's really good that just came in from Autumn, is can all types of businesses do this? For example, C Corps. Absolutely, whether you're a C Corp or an S Corp, doesn't necessarily matter how you are, your business is filed or the legal entity it is. There's ways to do it. It changes a little bit of the mechanics of how the process works, but we're able to transition any business. And the other one is, after the ESOP is launched, how do employees monetize their ownership stake when they need money or retire? It's an excellent question from Stephen. So it works, like I said, very similarly to a 401k, almost identically. And so at the age of retirement, they're able to draw from it, cash it in, as it were. And then there's a little bit more detail in terms of if they leave the company, you know, what happens. There's a lot of different options within that. It's one of the reasons why ESOPs are much more complex, is because there's a lot of things that need to be figured out and possibilities. But, you know, in terms of their ongoing ability to draw from it, it's not something necessarily that employees would be able to just draw out when they needed some money. It's you know, there are some mechanics make it not ideal for them to cash it in early, and similarly to other retirement plans. And then there are ways that it can be transferred to a different retirement account if they leave the business, for example. There's just lots of different options and complexities within there. Be happy to discuss it more more specifically. It's just going to be one of those things that's probably best done in the form of a consultation call. So I'll save everyone else the further details of that. Do you offer assistance? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Donna.
No, I was going to bring up Autumn's next question, but
yeah, go for it. You want to take that one?
Sure. Do you offer assistance with valuation? So our services in the feasibility phase of our work with clients, we do what's called a debt capacity analysis. So it's not a formal valuation. It's more based on what the company, it's price related around what the company could afford to pay for itself at a future free cash flow or future profit. So that is not a formal valuation, but we do recommend and that business owners also have valuations to really get a sense of what a price may be for their business.
Yeah, and so, you know, just to dovetail on with what Donna's saying, so we do the debt capacity analysis to be able to come up with a sales price. And although it's not a valuation in terms of how it's compared against the market and everything, that it's really about what the business can bear and be successful in the future. It's very similar to what you would go through with a private buyer in a due diligence period, right? So you have your valuation, maybe from a independent evaluator, but that's not necessarily the sales price, right? And so then the potential buyer is going to do a due diligence, and they will do a very similar process to what we do, digging through the finances, looking at projections, and to be able to see what what is going to be their return on investment of purchasing this business, and then the negotiations start. So, in the reality, this debt capacity is going to be, in most cases, very similar to what a valuation would be, but it's just done with a different methodology. But there's multiple methodologies out there, and it's always good to get, to get perspective on that. Okay, so next up we have, in the scenario where employees use financing to make the purchase, will their personal financial condition be considered? We have a key employee with no personal equity who we would like to set up as a co-owner. That's that's a good question. In the context of setting up a cooperative, it's really about the business's financial situation. If you are not wanting to do a cooperative, but you're wanting to make a employee a co-owner, that's a different scenario. That's not necessarily something that we really specialize in. We have awareness of those. I have previous experience in my other businesses with this type of function, but it's not necessarily something that we do because we are setting up broad-based employee ownership to give all or most employees the opportunity to become employee owners. And a thank you from Stephen on that first point. And we have another one from Ottoman, which is, in your experience with owners who are deeply enmeshed in operations, how long does the transition take? This is an excellent question. We work with owners who are not operationally involved to those who, for many different reasons, just could not see themselves operationally removed from that. That's why in our feasibility assessment program, what we do is actually talk about management transition. We really do a deep dive in that with you to look at what you need to replace. And so the timeline really depends on specifics. So in general, our process, you can guess about, it takes about a year to transition a company through our process. And some of it can be sooner, some of it can be later based on the new needs of the business and any complications that come up in the process. And so we'd be able to give more of a specific timeline once we do a feasibility assessment with you, and we go through all these details and kind of set up this straw model for you to be able to see what your business would look like as employee-owned entity, and what a timeline could look like, as well as unenmeshing yourself from the business. Great questions, by the way. Really, really fantastic questions. Really enjoying this. Hope you guys are getting a lot out of the presentation, and keep them coming. We probably have another few minutes that we can go if anybody else has additional questions.
And to dovetail a little bit off of what you were answering earlier in regards to an individual employee's financial history, because transitions to worker-owned cooperatives or ESOPs are not funded by the individual employees, but rather the business itself or a trust would take a loan to pay the history, pay for the purchase of the company. Individual employee financial standing is not as relevant. So it can be another advantage for an employee ownership type of exit or transition.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And to think very broadly, in most cases, whoever is taking on the debt, the source of the financing of that debt is going to want some crunch some numbers and have some assurances that they're likely to get that debt paid back, right? Because they're putting in that money and expect to be paid back with interest. It's also one of the reasons why we see a lot of owners participating in the finance, and why that's one of the ways that business owners extract a little bit more money out of the sale, is by participating in financing. They're able to then participate also in some of the interest on that amount. So if a sales price is established, because of the interest that they're earning, they're actually taking home more once the payment has been completed over time. Okay, so we have another great question here. What happens if the new entity fails before the loan is paid? That really depends on a few different factors. One, the funding source, right? Who's financing it? And two, sort of what is negotiated as a part of that deal. So for example, as an owner, let's say that you were fully financing it. Let's say you're just gonna take a seller's note, you don't need any money up front, and the business is gonna just pay you off over the next 5 to 8 years. There's a possibility that you could, as a part of that negotiation, build into the deal that if the business fails, ownership is transferred back to you, right? And that would give you a way to, if the business fails, that you could retain control and potentially build it back up, or sell it in another manner. That's possible, but in general, it really depends. What happens depends on the deal structure, and that is specific to how it's financed. And that's another great question that we, some of these stuff that we can speak very generally about here, but we can provide more deep, specific answers once we know your business a little bit more. And so doing a consultation with us would be a way for us to be able to give you a little bit deeper answers there that wouldn't be as general but specific to your business. All right. Do we have any additional questions or maybe some final thoughts? Donna, would you like to share any? We have another question come through, and that is, can you give us sever if cost? Sense of cost. Okay, great. Yes. Project. Thank you very much. So our standard models, if you want to go into the feasibility assessment program, which is a 3 to 4 month deep dive into your business, both financially, management, and employee. The cost for that for a cooperative is $5,000 flat fee. If it's an ESOP, there are other fees associated with that, and it depends on the specifics of the business. And then the transaction fee for transitioning, we offer on a sliding scale between about $20,000 and $40,000, and that's for everything that would be needed for the process except for lawyers and CPAs, which of course have their own hourly rates. And then that includes the full transition as well as our continued service of that business for up to 2 years after that. So we've worked very hard with funding sources to be able to make it as accessible as possible. And the good news is there are actually subsidies available through the City of San Francisco and the Economic Development Office. And so if you're interested, you'd be welcome to talk with us, apply to see if your business would fit for a subsidy, which can make our services even more accessible. So we'd love to talk to you more about that. Okay, so with that, I just want to thank everyone. It's been a wonderful presentation. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Donna and I are eager to get into some consultations with you for free, so please take advantage of that. It's a wonderful resource that's available, and happy to have casual conversations with you that's just covering the basics and answering more questions, or get into the details and give you more specific and targeted answers that would apply to the specifics of your business. So we look forward to speaking, and other than that, have a wonderful beginning to the holiday season. We hope you all stay safe and well.